Have you ever felt lost, as if you've made decisions that distanced you from everything that truly matters? Have you ever felt like, at some point in your life, you chose paths that seemed brilliant, but later turned out to be mere illusions that left your soul empty? This is a question many carry in silence, a wound few dare confess, but which the parable of the prodigal son lays bare before us. Imagine a young man full of dreams, believing that far from his father's house he would find freedom, pleasure, and achievement. He asks for his share of the inheritance and confidently continues to live his life as he wishes, never imagining that each step away from his father's presence would actually be a step toward emptiness. This same story repeats itself today in every person who decides to live far from God's presence, believing that the world has answers to their pains and solutions to their longings. How many have fallen into this trap, exchanging true love for superficial relationships, inner peace for constant anxiety, spiritual abundance for emotional and financial debt? This parable is not just an ancient tale, it is a modern portrait of lives that have strayed from their purpose. And perhaps you're wondering now, does this message speak to me? Can this parable told centuries ago still illuminate my steps today? The truth is that the prodigal son represents more than a biblical character. He is a reflection of each of us when we try to walk alone, when we believe we know more than the Father, when we trust that the momentary pleasures of the world will fill the void in our soul. But experience shows that no wealth, fame, pleasure, or achievement can replace the love and security that only God offers. The young man in the parable believed he would have a life of endless banquets and parties, but he ended up surrounded by pigs, hungry, humiliated, wanting only the bare necessities to survive. This also happens today, when we realize that everything that seemed like a conquest becomes a burden, that what seemed like freedom becomes a prison, and that what seemed like joy turns into pain. How many watching now don't carry regrets? Memories of choices that seemed good, but resulted in tears and sleepless nights. This story invites us to reflect on our own journey. How many paths have you taken, believing they would bring happiness, but which only took you further away from God's presence? How many times have you tried to seek in people, in material things, in fleeting pleasures, what only the Father could give you? The prodigal son shows us that the turning point always begins when we recognize we're in the wrong place, when we admit we need to return home, when we understand we can no longer live apart from the Father's presence. This parable isn't about shame, it's about hope. It's about a love that never gives up, even when you think you don't deserve another chance. But before we reach the moment of reunion, we need to understand the weight of separation, the marks of error, and how this journey of illusion continues to be traveled by many today. And it is precisely at this point that the parable begins to transform into something even more profound for us today. Because the prodigal son's departure is not just a distant metaphor, it is a living warning for every heart listening to this message now. Perhaps you know someone walking similar paths. Perhaps it's even you, trying to find answers in the wrong places and returning empty-handed. But here's the most powerful detail. There is always a way back. And that path begins when we open our hearts, recognize our need, and bend our knees in prayer. That's why I want to invite you right now to leave your prayer request in the comments. Write without fear, because we will pray together. We will cry out for your life, for your family, for your decisions, because prayer opens doors that no human force can open. When you comment, it's not just an interaction on a video. It's an act of faith. It's like saying, Father, I want to return to you. So if this message has already touched your heart, write your request now so that the power of prayer can reach your story. And if you're here so far, it's no coincidence. God is speaking to you and calling you closer. So be sure to subscribe to the channel, because each new video is a living word to strengthen your faith and remind you that you're not alone on this journey. Activate the bell so you don't miss any message, because every detail could be exactly what your heart needs to hear that day. Also, leave your like, because it helps this word reach others who, like you, need to hear that there is a way back. Imagine how many lives can be transformed just because you decided to support this simple yet powerful message. So subscribe now, like, and share this video. And remember, in addition to your prayer request in the comments, also write "I want to go home," because this will be a declaration of faith, a cry from your soul saying that you choose the Father's embrace, the restoration, and the full life that only He can give. Have you ever felt lost, far from everything that truly matters, unsure of how to get back? Have you ever stopped to think about how many times you've made decisions believing you were on the right path, only to realize that each choice took you further away from peace, true joy, and God's purpose for your life? This feeling of being distant, of having been led astray by illusions, is more common than you might think, and this is exactly what the parable of the prodigal son teaches us. Because it's not just a story told by Jesus centuries ago, it's a perfect snapshot of many hearts today, a reflection of the souls of men and women who tried to seek freedom away from God and ended up finding only loneliness, pain, and regret. Think about it. The young man in the parable believed his life would be better outside his father's house. He asked for his inheritance, wanting to enjoy everything now, without rules, without limits, without advice, simply living according to what his deceitful heart dictated. But what seemed like a conquest soon revealed itself to be a prison. This is what happens in our generation. How many believe they will find happiness in fleeting pleasures, in superficial relationships, in material achievements that shine on the outside but rot on the inside? How many place all their hope in money, status, and possessions, but realize when they are alone that none of these can fill the emptiness in their soul? The parable of the prodigal son shows exactly this. He set out full of illusions, believing he would be master of his own destiny, but each step away from his father's house was a step toward pain. This is where many of us identify, because we all have our stories of estrangement, of choices that seemed right, but deep down opened deep wounds. And if you are listening to this now and feel that this message speaks directly to you, understand that it is no coincidence. It is God reminding you that the path back exists, and it begins with the awareness that far from the Father there is no full life, only crumbs that never satisfy. The reality is that the world offers banquets of illusions, but soon exacts a heavy price. The prodigal son spent everything, surrounded by people who seemed like friends while there was money and parties, but who disappeared when the abundance ended. This is the same reality today. People who approach us only out of self-interest, who walk beside us while there is something to offer, but who disappear when we need support most. How many times have you experienced this feeling of abandonment? How many times have you placed your trust in someone and been disappointed? The parable warns us that false freedom always leads to emotional, spiritual, and often even physical slavery, because those who distance themselves from God end up trapped in cycles of pain that only His love can break. That's why this story is so timely, because all of us, at some point, have tried to find happiness away from those who can truly give us true joy, and discovered that nothing can replace the Father's embrace. And perhaps at this very moment, you're remembering specific situations in your life, decisions that seem to have distanced you from God's presence, paths that led you to pain you didn't expect, choices that now weigh on your shoulders like burdens difficult to bear. But the good news is that the parable doesn't stop at error. It points to hope. The young man in the mud, tending pigs, hungry and humiliated, awakens, and this awakening is the key. He remembers his father's house, remembers that even the servants had bread in abundance while he was dying of hunger. This is the turning point, when we recognize that apart from God, there is no life, when we realize that all the brightness outside is extinguished, and that true light is only found in the Father's presence. Have you ever had this moment of awakening? Have you ever felt this need to return to where you truly belong? And it's precisely at this point that I want to invite you to interact. back. If this message has already touched your heart, leave the phrase, "I want to go home," in the comments. Write this as a declaration of faith, as a step toward God's embrace, because each written word is also a silent prayer that rises to the heavens. And if you wish, share your prayer request as well. We will pray together. We will cry out for your life, your family, your dreams, and your future. Don't be silent, because when you write, you activate faith. You declare that you don't want to stay in the same place, but desire a new beginning. And take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel right now, because each new video is an opportunity to receive more of this living word that can transform your heart. Hit the bell so you don't miss any messages, and leave your like, because this helps spread this word to thousands of others who also need to hear that there is a way back. Share it too, because perhaps someone in your circle of friends desperately needs to hear this message today. The moment the son decides to leave home is a vivid portrayal of how many of us, at some point in our lives, believe we know what's best for ourselves. He looks to his father, asks for his share of the inheritance, and without considering the consequences, sets off in search of a world that in his eyes seemed full of opportunities, pleasures, and achievements. It's as if he's saying, "I no longer need your protection, your care, or your presence. I can walk alone." And how many times have we repeated this same silent speech within ourselves? When we choose to work tirelessly because we believe money will give us security, when we place all our hope in relationships that only wear us down, when we trade moments of intimacy with God for fleeting distractions that consume us and leave us even more empty. The son believed he would have freedom, but this freedom was an illusion, a false glow that distanced him from the only source of true joy. He leaves home with his pockets full of money, surrounded by promises and expectations, and in the first few days, he perhaps felt like the most fulfilled man in the world. Parties, people around him, music, food, laughter, everything seemed perfect. But this is the illusion that still captivates so many people today, the idea that having, possessing, and showing off is enough to guarantee happiness. How many chase status, followers, likes, and applause, believing that human recognition will fill their inner emptiness? How many make the pursuit of momentary pleasure the center of their lives, unaware that deep down, every excess leaves invisible scars that corrode the soul? The prodigal son is the perfect representation of this deception. He spent everything as if it would never end, but when the riches disappeared, so did his supposed friends, and what remained was loneliness. This is the same cycle we see in so many stories today. People who believe they'll find meaning in alcohol, drugs, toxic relationships, or even a life of excess and appearances. At first, everything seems like a party, but the bill always arrives, and the price is too high. The freedom that seemed sweet turns into invisible shackles that bind the heart, mind, and even the body. The child, who believed he was free, ends up a slave to his choices. And isn't this what we see all around us? People with everything they ever wanted, yet feeling emptier than ever. Life away from God may seem satisfying for a time, but it doesn't take long to show that true freedom lies not in separation, but in His presence. The most striking thing is that this illusion doesn't discriminate against age, social status, or financial situation. It affects young people who think they need to experience everything before committing to God, adults who believe that stability and material comfort replace faith, and even the elderly who look back with regret for having invested their strength in fleeting things. The journey away from the Father always brings the same consequences, a void that nothing can fill. Because away from God, even the most brilliant achievement fades. It's like holding sand in your hands. The more you try to hold it, the faster it slips through your fingers. And perhaps you're living exactly that moment, believing that just one more step, just one more achievement, just one more pleasure will satisfy your soul. But the reality is that nothing in this world can take the place God created within your heart. The illusion of freedom turns into prison. The relentless pursuit of happiness turns into weariness, and smiles that seem sincere soon give way to the silence of sleepless nights, the weight of regret, the anguish of not knowing where else to go. The prodigal son, at the height of his delusion, didn't realize that every coin spent brought him closer to the abyss. And that's the great trap. Mistakes don't seem like mistakes when we're deluded. We only realize it when we're already at the bottom. That's why this parable is so timely, because it shows us that no matter how bright the path away from God may be, sooner or later, it always ends in darkness. It's a hard but necessary lesson. All happiness based on fleeting things fades, but the joy that comes from the Father remains forever. If this part of the message has already touched you, write the word freedom in the comments, because I want to see who is deciding to open their eyes to the illusions of this world and seek true freedom in Christ. Also, take the opportunity to leave your prayer request, because together we can cry out for your life and your family. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, do so now, activate the bell, and leave a like. Because besides supporting this content, you'll be helping this message reach others who also need to hear that true freedom only exists in the Father's embrace. Rock bottom always arrives faster than we imagine, and that's exactly what happened to the prodigal son. Once confident, surrounded by parties, beautiful clothes, and people who called themselves friends, he now found himself alone, with nothing, no hope, and no one to lend a hand. The scene is humiliating. This young man, who believed he had everything within his reach, was now among the pigs, craving the food that even the animals left behind. Imagine the contrast, from the son of a rich and honorable man to someone completely helpless, without resources, dignity, and prospects. This is the perfect picture of when illusion shatters and reality hits hard. How often do we see this same scene in real life? People who have lost everything, who have fallen into unpayable debt, who have fallen into broken relationships, or who live endless nights without peace, just trying to survive amidst an unbearable burden. Rock bottom can take many forms, but the feeling is always the same: a profound emptiness and a suffocating loneliness. This young man, while tending the pigs, experienced not only physical hunger, but spiritual hunger. He longed for something to fill his soul, because there was nothing true around him anymore. This part of the parable is a warning to all of us, because often we only recognize our need for God when there's nothing left, when wealth runs out, when friends disappear, when the smile on our faces can no longer hide the tears on the pillow. And it is at this point that many realize that all the glitter in the world is temporary, that all false promises fade away, and that without the Father's presence, there is no real hope. Perhaps you, listening to me now, are exactly in this place, tired, without strength, looking around and realizing there is no way out. But know that it is precisely in this moment of humiliation that the greatest miracle of your life can be born. Hitting rock bottom is painful, but it can also be the beginning of a new beginning. It's there, when we have nowhere left to run, that we often remember that there is a God with open arms, waiting only for our return. The prodigal son came to his senses and realized that even his father's servants lived better than he did, and this reflection was the key to his recovery. See how the parable teaches us. There's no need to stay stuck in the mud forever. The moment of awakening is when we recognize the truth, when we admit that we can't continue on the same path. This is the power of reflection, opening our eyes to reality and having the courage to change. How many people today need this awakening? How many need to admit that it's no longer possible to pretend, that it's time to return, that it's time to seek help, that it's time to surrender to God's love? This awakening also shows us that it is often necessary to go through pain to appreciate restoration. The son only understood the value of his father's house when he had nothing left, and this is repeated in our lives. We only recognize the value of peace when we are immersed in anxiety. We only recognize the value of true love when we suffer from broken relationships. We only understand the importance of God's presence when we feel the weight of loneliness. It is not God who throws us into the depths of the pit, but he uses this place to show us that we need to return. It is in pain that the heart opens. It is in despair that the Father's voice becomes clearer. It is in scarcity that we realize that only He can give us true abundance. And perhaps this message speaks directly to you. Perhaps you're experiencing what the prodigal son experienced today: sleepless nights, seemingly insoluble debts, a heart shattered by bad choices, broken relationships that have left deep scars. Maybe you're tired of smiling on the outside and crying on the inside, trying to appear strong when you really feel like you're at your limit. If this is your case, know that rock bottom isn't the end. It's simply the place where God can begin a new story. But it's necessary to acknowledge it. It's necessary to get up. It's necessary to decide to return. And I want to invite you at this moment to take a step of faith. Write the word hope in the comments, because it will be a sign that you are choosing not to stay at the bottom, but to rise up toward the life God has prepared for you. Also, leave your prayer request, because we will pray together. We will cry out for your life, your family, and your journey back. Take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel, because each message here is a seed of faith that can blossom in your heart. And also leave your like, because this helps this word reach thousands of other people who also need to awaken. Share this message with someone you know who is suffering, because maybe that's exactly what they need to hear today. The path back begins within the heart, with a silent but powerful decision to acknowledge our mistake and decide to rise. The prodigal son, after experiencing the humiliation of rock bottom, realized he couldn't continue like that. He remembered his father's house, remembered how even the servants lived better than he was living at that moment, and it was in that moment of reflection that hope was born. This is the most precious detail of the parable. The return didn't begin when he crossed the roads back home, but at the very moment he said to himself, "I will arise and go to my father." Therein lies the secret, because true transformation always begins when we have the courage to acknowledge our mistakes, when we admit we're far from our purpose, and make the decision to return to God's presence. No matter how much time has passed, no matter how many mistakes you've made, there will always be an opportunity for a new beginning when the heart opens to the truth. This gesture by the Son is as timely as it is necessary. How many people today are trapped in past guilt, believing they no longer deserve a second chance, that they have failed so much that they no longer deserve forgiveness? But the parable shows us that the Father is not waiting for a perfect son to return. He is only waiting for a son willing to return. And this is the good news. No matter the distance traveled, the Father is always waiting, always attentive, always ready to restore. We often carry unnecessary weight, thinking we need to solve everything ourselves before seeking God's presence. But the path back is precisely for those who can no longer walk alone, for those who need to be carried by the Father's love. Acknowledging error is not a sign of weakness. It is an act of courage. It is the first step toward true freedom. And here we need to bring this parable to bear on present reality. What does it mean to return home today? It means bending our knees in prayer, even when it seems we have no words left, only tears. It means seeking reconciliation with God through faith, confessing our faults, and receiving the forgiveness He has already reserved for us. It means returning to the spiritual discipline that strengthens our journey, reading the Word, moments of prayer, perseverance in not giving up, even when struggles continue. The prodigal son didn't wait for the situation to become more comfortable before deciding to return. He got up still wounded, still dirty, still with nothing in his hands. This teaches us that we don't need to wait until we're ready to return to God, because it is He who restores us along the way. The most beautiful thing about this story is that the Father not only waits, but runs to meet us. This shows that the path back is not traveled alone. With every step we take toward God, He takes 10 steps toward us. He doesn't stand with His arms crossed, judging, but with His arms open, ready to embrace. And perhaps you who are listening to this now feel like you've gone too far, that sin, mistakes, or spiritual coldness have distanced you so much that there's no turning back. But the truth is that distance doesn't matter, because the Father's love is always greater. He sees the repentant heart. He hears even the most silent prayers, and he is ready to turn tears into smiles and shame into honor. The path back is not about the past you left behind, but about the future you can still live in his presence. And perhaps this is the moment for you to make your decision. How many times have you felt the desire to change, but put it off? How many times have you promised yourself you'd return, but let time pass, believing you still had control of the situation? The prodigal son could have stood still, thinking of all the reasons he didn't deserve forgiveness, but he decided to stand up, and that decision changed everything. Now it's your turn to reflect. What's stopping you from returning to God today? What's keeping you in the same place? Remember, there's no mistake too great to erase the Father's love, no distance too far he can't travel to rescue you. The first step is yours, but the restoration is his. If this message spoke to your heart, I invite you to engage in a practical way. Write in the comments, "I decide to return." This phrase will be more than just words. It will be a commitment before God, a sign that you recognize the need to return. Also, leave your prayer request, because together we will pray for your life, your family, and your path back. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because each video here is a new opportunity to strengthen your faith. Activate the bell so you don't miss future messages, and leave a like, because this helps this word reach thousands of people who also need to make this decision of hope. Also, share this video with someone you know is far from God, because perhaps it is precisely through you that the Father will call another child back home. The prodigal son had made his decision to get up and return. But now we need to imagine what was going on inside him as he walked toward his father's house. Each step he took was heavy, not only because of the distance, but also because of shame, uncertainty, and fear of rejection. He rehearsed his words, preparing a humble speech, ready to ask no longer for the position of son, but for the chance to be treated simply as a servant. This scene is so powerful because it shows how we often carry the weight of the past when we decide to return to God. How many today fear not being accepted? How many think their failures are too great, that their mistakes have erased any possibility of starting over? The journey back requires courage. But what the son didn't yet know is that, even before he arrived home, his father's heart had already made the decision to welcome him. The father, spotting his son from afar, didn't wait for him to finish walking. He didn't cross his arms to listen to excuses. He didn't remain silent to assess whether his repentance was genuine. On the contrary, he ran, and running at that time, for an elderly man of standing, was unthinkable, because it wasn't worthy. But the Father's love was stronger than any protocol, stronger than any shame, stronger even than the pain he himself had felt when his son left. This scene is the perfect translation of God's grace. He runs to meet us. He doesn't wait for speeches. He doesn't impose conditions. He simply embraces. Imagine this moment: the son, still dirty, still ragged, still carrying the smell of pigs, being enveloped in an embrace of acceptance, forgiveness, and restoration. This is the Father's love, a love that looks not at the filth, but at the repentant heart. And here's the most impressive part. The Father doesn't just embrace us, he orders new clothes, a ring, and sandals for his son's feet. These symbols represent complete restoration. The new clothes are the covering of dignity. The ring represents the authority of a son, and the sandals are a sign of freedom, because servants didn't wear sandals, only sons. What God does with us is exactly this. He not only forgives us, but also returns everything sin tried to steal. He restores us, gives us a new identity, reminds us of who we truly are. Perhaps you, listening to this message, feel dirty, unworthy, and worthless, but the Father looks at you and already sees a beloved son, ready to be restored. This is the God who not only forgives, but transforms, not only receives, but celebrates return. The Father even orders a feast prepared. He declares before everyone, "This son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." This means that the journey back does not end in silence, but in celebration. All heaven rejoices when a heart decides to return to God. This is not just a parable about the prodigal son. It is a revelation about how the Father reacts to each of us. He holds no grudges. He does not place the past as a barrier. He simply opens his arms and prepares a banquet of grace and love. This is the heart of the Father, always ready to welcome, always ready to restore, always eager to celebrate the return of his children. And it is at this point that this message also becomes an invitation to you. Perhaps you believed God was distant. Perhaps you felt that your mistakes had erased your chance of returning. But today, he is telling you, "I run to meet you." This is the moment to open your heart and believe that the Father's embrace is real, that he will not reject you, that he will not humiliate you, that he will not push you away. On the contrary, he will restore you, clothe you with dignity, give you authority as a son and true freedom. This is grace, the undeserved gift that only God's love can offer. And if this message has already touched you, I want to ask you something very special. Write the phrase, "I receive the Father's embrace," in the comments. This phrase will be more than a comment. It will be a public declaration of your faith, a sign that you believe in God's love and that you are willing to experience this restoration. Also, take the opportunity to leave your prayer request, because we will intercede together for you and your family. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel right now, because each new word here can be the nourishment your soul needs. Activate the bell so you don't miss any messages. Leave your like so this word reaches thousands of people, and share this video with someone who needs to hear about the Father's embrace. You can be the instrument God will use to bring another child home. If you felt God's voice speaking directly to your heart through this message, don't delay. Subscribe to the channel right now, because each video we prepare here is spiritual nourishment to strengthen your faith and renew your hope. Activate the bell to be the first to receive each word that can transform your life. And if you made it to the end of this video, I want you to write the phrase here in the comments, "I heard the voice of God," because this will be a declaration of faith, living proof that the Lord continues to speak to his children. Also, leave your like, because it helps this message reach thousands of people who also need this touch from heaven. And don't leave yet, because the next video that's appearing on your screen brings another powerful word that can change the course of your life. Click and continue receiving everything God has prepared especially for you.